Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of ATL Developments with Geoff Smith. We are recording from the Business Radio X studios inside of Renaissance Bank up here in Alpharetta, where we talk about all things economic development throughout the metro Atlanta area. I'm a mortgage banker with Assurance Financial, and if you need a loan, please always feel free to reach out. But I write a weekly column that goes out in a newsletter and is run on the business pages of the Herald newspapers throughout North Fulton, Forsyth counties, and now Dunwoody. If you want to get on my newsletter list, or if you have questions about a mortgage, please email me at gsmith@lendtheway.com. That's gsmith@lendtheway.com. It's like lead the way, except we lend money, so it's lendtheway.com. You know, as you drive through Atlanta, do you ever wonder why some business districts seem to look nicer than others? And those same districts seem to see road improvements more frequently or new roads and bridges added. Well, you know what? There may very well be a good reason for that. Some of those areas could be in a community improvement district. Community improvement districts, or CIDs as they are normally called, are self-taxing districts where businesses with a specific geographical area agree to pay a tax every year, where those funds are reinvested back into that same geographical area. An organization is created to administer how those funds are allocated, and a board made up of property owners within the district typically oversees high-level decisions on the operations of the CID. They have proven to be very successful for the areas around Atlanta where they've been created. Residents in those cities love them because the businesses, not the residents, are funding improvements in the area. The businesses love them because the funds are used to make aesthetical improvements, to make the area look better, to improve the movement of traffic, or to fund studies that lead to infrastructure improvements that would enable a business in the area to operate more efficiently and effectively. Two of the most successful CIDs in the metro Atlanta area, in my opinion, are the Perimeter CID in Dunwoody, Sandy Springs, and the North Fulton CID up here in Alpharetta. These CIDs have been instrumental in the launch of such projects that include the beautiful Encore Parkway Bridge over Georgia 400, the addition of new lanes that will be added to I-285 and Georgia 400, to things like installing and maintaining landscaping along highway exits, to developing strategies for encouraging more bicycle traffic or supplying additional traffic officers during peak hours. You know, CIDs have shown to be very useful in the retention and attraction of businesses to their geographical area. But not many people out there really know what a CID is. They don't even know, when they're driving through one. My guest today has actually overseen both of these CIDs I just mentioned. We've been friends for several years, and we are very lucky to have the Perimeter CID's executive director and a member of last year's Atlanta Business Chronicle 40 Under 40, Ann Hanlon. She graduated from University of Notre Dame and worked briefly for the Atlanta Regional Commission before jumping into the world of CIDs. Ann, how are you doing?
Hey, Jeff. I'm great. Happy to be here.
Well, we are very happy to have you. And you may not know this, but I start off every show by asking my guests where they came from. You know, here in Atlanta, we're such a melting pot. People move here from all over the country. So it's kind of always interesting to me to just find out, where you grew up, kind of what that was like and what brought you to Atlanta. And you are not a native. So where you come from, Ann?
I'm not a native. Thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely.
I'm a proud South Georgia native, actually. So I've been in Atlanta now for almost 18 years, but I grew up in Waycross, Georgia, which is a little town down in the corner of southeast Georgia, if you've ever heard of the Okefenokee Swamp.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm from the home of the alligators. So I'm from the Okefenokee Swamp. I grew up there. My parents still live there. My grandfather was the mayor of Waycross. When I was
kidding. Okay.
Yeah, when I was growing up. So just really, really proud to be from South Georgia.
So you've been kind of involved in things ever since you were young.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
What kind of things was going on in Waycross? What kind of what was it like growing up there from I guess an economic development perspective, and what was life like? I guess just a little bit about Waycross.
Yeah, so Waycross is a small town, but it is home to one of the largest railroad transfer yards in the country. Actually,
wow. Okay.
Yeah, the Rice Yard, which was named for Mr. Rice, who was a kind of a pioneer pioneer in the railroad industry. That's headquartered there. My grandfather worked for the railroad. You saw a lot of Midwestern transplants executives come from the Midwest. My grandfather was from Chicago.
Okay.
Came to the railroad, and so shipment back then it was Norfolk Southern. It now is CSX, which of course is headquartered out of Jacksonville. But so if you are a consumer and you're buying something here in Atlanta, chances are it came through the port of Savannah, through some sort of an inland port, through Waycross, Georgia, on a train, and then out to Atlanta or some other part of the country.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so that's for that small town. That's been their economic development, and there's been a lot of other, sort of domino effect industries that have come out of that. But that's always been the base.
Well, that's cool. That's very cool. That's very interesting. And so, you went from there to University of Notre Dame, right, in Indiana. And somehow ended up in Atlanta. How'd you come to Atlanta? How'd that happen?
Yeah, so I Catholic, went to Notre Dame. I came back. I moved to Atlanta in 2002.
Okay.
I wanted to. I'd like to tell my friends I went to church on Easter Sunday and it was snowing.
Okay.
And I decided that I was tired of being up north in a place where it snowed on Easter. I was ready to get back down south. So I actually applied to grad school, got into a master's program at Georgia State.
Okay.
And I was really, really lucky. I got a job with the Atlanta Regional Commission. I kind of wanted to be in the public policy, urban planning space. And was really fortunate to get a job at the Atlanta Regional Commission in a division that does not even exist anymore. But back then it was called the Local Government Services Division.
Okay.
So I was able to work at ARC during the day, go to classes at night to pursue my master's.
Awesome.
And it was a really neat fit for me because what that department did at the time was they basically provided outreach services to all the local governments around Metro Atlanta on the services that ARC provides. Transportation planning, water planning, senior services. And so I got a bit of a personal crash course in Metro Atlanta. Like I would be in the car driving to Cobb County and Fayette County and Henry County and Alpharetta. And I got to meet with mayors and county commissioners and city council. So I was very fortunate to get to use that experience. I learned my way around Atlanta. I got to meet a lot of people and a lot of the big decision makers at the time. So it was very serendipitous for me.
Yeah, that is a crash course and how everything's put together. And clearly you made a good impression. I think you went from there directly to the Perimeter CID. Did you start out there for a little bit?
I did.
And then the North Fulton CID, in its instance, 2 years into it, I think you became the executive director of that. So, CIDs, I guess, did I explain what a CID is correctly? I saw you nodding your head, so I kept going, and it looked like I knew what I was talking about. But if you could, I guess, in your words, what makes a CID beneficial, to the property owners within it?
Sure. So a CID, a Community Improvement District, is really unique. It's a unique organization because it truly is a blend of the public and private. For me, it was always appealing having a desire and sort of an altruistic nature to want to give back to the community. But also having worked in government, I interned on Capitol Hill in Washington when I was in college. Also spent some time interning for the Department of Labor here in the state of Georgia. Okay. So having worked inside of governmental organizations, it can be frustrating because there's never enough money.
Right.
There's never enough money or people or resources. And for all of the best laid plans that any government body has, there's just never enough resources to accomplish everything you want. So CIDs, in my view, are really important because they put the resources in. You actually, there's money to build things. You described they're self-taxing business districts.
Right.
So each CID in the state of Georgia can institute its own tax. It's a taxing, although it is not a public agency, it's a taxing body.
Right.
And so dollars can be generated to build projects. And it's really I don't want to say it's unique because CIDs were actually modeled. CIDs in Georgia were modeled after similar organizations in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area. So other states have business improvement districts. But you really, in communities that have CIDs, they are able to provide the resources to get projects built that the government may otherwise not ever have.
Sure. So instead of having to go through a government entity to get a road improvement or something like that and wait for the red tape, wait for them to they've got voters that they've got to be accountable for. So every time they decide to spend money somewhere, there's a couple hundred people who probably want to have something to say about it, whereas the businesses can raise the money and just spend it freely.
Yeah, and a little bit of the history. So the first CID in Georgia was founded in the 80s. In the late 80s, John Williams, who has now passed away, John was one of the founders of Post Properties, the apartment complex company in Cobb County. At the time, Johnny Isaacson, now a U.S. Senator, was actually in the state legislature as a state senator. So John Williams, and there's a large group of kind of commercial property owners over in Cobb County area who wanted to build the Kennedy interchange, right? Big interchange with I-75. And they petitioned the county. They all had developments. A CID is a self-interested group, right? This is not totally altruistic. They had real estate developments around the area, and they wanted the interchange to be built. They petitioned the county, the state, the cities. There was not the money to build it.
Right.
And so John Williams led that group of developers and worked with Senator Isaacson, who crafted the legislation. They basically said, well, we're willing to pay for it ourselves. Right. Which I think is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. Benefits everybody in the area. Doesn't
That's
it?
right.
Yeah.
I always tell people, no one wants to pay more taxes.
That's right.
Who among us would volunteer to pay more taxes? And, here in the late 80s in Metro Atlanta, you had a group of commercial property owners, and they raised their hand, and they say, we're willing to pay more to get this infrastructure built that, by the way, everyone's going to use.
Sure.
So the first CID was founded in Cobb in the 80s. Each CID board, they established a governance structure. Each CID board can set its own millage rate, so like a county commission or a school board. Now, if you fast forward to 2019, there's 27 CIDs.
There's 27
in Metro Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay.
So they obviously were doing something right, and the model has been emulated time and time again.
Well, and you talk about the first one that was started where they all raised their hand and said, "Can we do this?" And so I'm thinking back to when y'all were starting the North Fulton CID. When you became a part of it, I don't know how. It wasn't in its current state. It's clearly grown a lot since 2003. I don't imagine that every business owner or property owner, I should say, is as willing to raise their hand and volunteer for the tax. I imagine there's some sort of salesmanship that goes on in recruiting. Does it take a lot of convincing to some property owners over others, or are property owners pretty quick to jump into something like this?
It takes convincing.
Okay.
So when I joined the North Fulton CID, I joined in January of 2005.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
So
started in 2003, and you joined it in 2005.
It did.
Okay.
I was their first. Yeah. I was their first hire.
Okay.
Technically, the first full-time hire. And at that time, we had about 100 property owners. So Brandon Beach, who was with the Chamber of Commerce at the time.
Yep.
Bob Regas, the city manager of Alpharetta at the time, was very helpful. Tom Ladow, who's no longer on the board, he was with Colonial Properties, a real estate developer at the time. Those three gentlemen in particular did pound the pavement.
Okay.
They went to businesses, they did the sales pitch and said, would you please join this organization and pay more taxes? And they did, and they established a base of owners and created the CID. One of the things that I was really proud of when I came on board is we had the mechanism built. The organization was started. We were legal. We were commissioned by the county, and we had started to receive those payments, but we didn't have a plan. So in order to grow and to attract more members to come on board, we had to be able to demonstrate to them what they were going to get for that investment.
Sure.
So having a project list helps. When you're able to have a project list and say, these are the 30 things that we want to build. And it was a blend of projects. Some of them were road projects or intersection improvements, sidewalk projects, landscaping projects. And we were able to then carry that project plan forward to recruit new members. And I think when I left about 2 years ago, we had about 370 members of the CID.
Okay.
But being able to demonstrate what you're going to do for those owners is critical. And it's different. I would just add, it's in every community in Metro Atlanta is so different, and the needs are so different. So the needs, in the North Fulton market, beautification was one of the things we did. We did landscaping treatments at all the interchanges along 400, but also traffic.
While you're talking, for those listeners, if you drive up and you wonder why those exits in Alpharetta all look so landscaped and manicured and really kind of branded in a way, it's because of the CID is putting the extra dollars in to make them look the way they do, make them look inviting, make them look like a place you'd like to get off and travel to.
That's right.
So, a lot of people don't know that. So when you first started, so you had your list of projects, what was the first big project that the North Fulton CID tackled that you kind of remember?
Yeah, the first project, it was big to me.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, it's probably small in comparison. We did sidewalks on Mansell Road.
Okay.
So the CID started more south, and then it grew geographically. It grew sort of from Mansell Road towards Windward.
Okay.
So our first base of owners was along the Mansell Road corridor, kind of from, if you can imagine, from North Point, a parkway where
Sure.
P.F. Chang's is, and then headed west to where the Hennessy Land Rover car dealership is. That was sort of our first base of owners. The first project that we did was to construct sidewalks right there from like P.F. Chang's, from the exit ramp to the exit ramp. So sort of in front of P.F. Chang's, over Georgia 4. Is it over or under Georgia 400?
Under right there.
Under
You're
right
right
there, under
Yeah.
Georgia 400. We built the sidewalks. We applied for a grant. We built the sidewalks, and we partnered with the city of Alpharetta to do the stonework and the landscaping.
Awesome.
Which is important because there's a park and ride lot there. MARTA has a park and ride lot there for buses.
Sure.
And so, I would go out in the afternoons, and I would see people get off the MARTA bus, and there were cow trails in the grass where people were walking, legitimately walking, and there was no safe sidewalk for the pedestrians.
Oh, that's great. So that was the first big one. And so, one thing I've always found fascinating, it's not just, hey, here's a bunch of money and the projects get done. I mean, this puts you in the middle of working with numerous entities. And if I was wondering if we could, just to give folks an idea of the lengths that you actually go and the CIDs actually go to get certain projects done. To me, the Encore Parkway Bridge was a huge, huge project. And you worked with the state, worked with, I don't know how many entities. I remember I was there at the grand opening and the ribbon cutting, and they just kept talking about all the different people that were involved. And it was just unbelievable who all you had to talk to help get that thing done and use the money. Y'all seeded a part of it. And I was wondering if we could use that as kind of an example of what y'all do, and maybe you could kind of tell us how that project kind of started, what y'all's financial commitment was, and kind of what you did behind the scenes to make that happen, if that's still kind of fresh in your mind. I know it was a little while ago, right? And it was right when you were leaving, before you left, did it got done, or when was that?
It was right. I think the grand opening was the week after I left.
No, right.
So
Week
they did invite me to
okay.
come back.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's actually a really good example because one thing that CIDs do generate dollars,
right.
but that really is not the end of it.
Right.
So for the Encore Parkway project is a great example because the North Fulton CID, we started out doing a study of the area. So the North Point Mall, who was owned at the time by General Growth Properties, now they're owned by Brookfield. That was our biggest member in the entire CID. And that is the case, coincidentally, also at Perimeter, that the mall is, in a lot of these big suburban markets, the mall is typically the largest business anchor parcel. Huh. So we had spoken for years to North Point Mall about the mall and its future, and making sure that it was ready to become the mall of the future, right, and be connected, and not be just a big regional mall surrounded by a sea of parking. And how would you bring the infrastructure up to date so that the mall could begin its sort of redevelopment process?
And the transition that's going on today with it.
That's right.
Tearing down the Sears and putting up apartments and all that kind of stuff. And
That's
just
right.
to give folks an overview, too, of kind of the area, if you're not familiar, you've got Georgia 400 running north and south. And then to the right and left of it, or the east and west of it, you have two arterial roads, I guess you would call them, in North Point Parkway and West Side Parkway. And right there was a bridge there, and it basically connected the amphitheater, which I think is Ameris Amphitheater now. I think they changed the name. But it's been Encore Verizon Amphitheater for years, to North Point Parkway. The two are right next to each other. But it was just a driving bridge. The new bridge is absolutely beautiful. It's got walking and biking lanes, planters going across it. From the road, it looks amazing. You want to get off Georgia 400 and get on that bridge somehow. And so it's just a beautiful bridge. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought it'd be good to give them an overview of what it actually was.
Thank you. That's important.
And
it's important to think about the context of the mall. CIDs, we build infrastructure, right?
Sure.
So we don't necessarily do development,
right,
but we build infrastructure. So when you think about the mall, on one side of the highway, you've got a mall, a big regional mall that's doing pretty well. On the other side of the highway, you've got a big regional concert venue, also doing pretty well. And scattered amongst those are some smaller retail and some smaller residential. So we went out and talked to people. I actually went out and personally interviewed some of the residents that lived in some of the apartments along West Side Parkway at the time. And you just ask people, would you ever walk to the mall to grab a drink or dinner or to go shopping? Would you ever traverse the bridge that crossed the highway at the time? Was a 2-lane bridge with no sidewalks.
Right.
There was like a ledge, kind of a ledge that people would walk on, but it certainly wasn't safe. And 10 out of every 10 people said, no way. No way. No, I would never walk across that bridge over the highway to go to the mall. And then you ask people on the other side of the highway, well, you've got this fabulous concert venue right over there within walking distance. If Jimmy Buffett were playing and I gave you tickets, how would you get there? Would you walk? And 10 out of 10 people said no way.
And we're talking about a 10-minute walk.
Right. A 10-minute walk tops. And so it became very, very clear that the way to sort of fix the problem in the area that wasn't even really perceived to be a problem. At the time, I don't think people thought there was a problem with the area. But the way to get the area ready for the future was to fix the infrastructure, and specifically to fix the bridge, and to create, instead of a little tiny 2-lane bridge with no sidewalks, to build a bigger bridge with the biggest sidewalks in Metro Atlanta that was well lit with, decorative pavers and landscape plant boxes so that people would make that trip and people would walk. Like, how can you ever get people out of their cars and walking if it's not comfortable? So began the journey.
Identified the need, identified the concept, and so now how do you put this thing into action? Right.
So now becomes the hard work. So the CID, we paid for all the engineering. We identified the work. We applied for a grant from the Atlanta Regional Commission. Some of my old colleagues. Got the grant to do some of the planning. We paid for the engineering firm. We hired Arcadis. It's a big engineering firm. They developed the plans, and then we went out and did fundraising, basically. We had no different than a business would do. The bridge was $10 million.
To build.
And also keep in mind, we tore down the old bridge because we did talk about, should we just add to the old bridge? And we decided, no, we got to tear that thing down and build something new altogether. So it was a bit of a patchwork quilt. We got funding from the state Department of Transportation. Many thanks to the city of Alpharetta. Pete Sashevitz, who's in Public Works, helped us secure about $1.5 million from the city of Alpharetta. Our CID board came out of pocket $4 million. We wrote a check for $4 million.
$4 million out of from the tax money that was.
That's right.
Okay.
From the tax money that we get.
So 4 out of the 10 came from the CID.
That's right.
Okay, and then the state.
The state ponied it. It was 4 from the state,
an ARC grant,
1.5 from the city of Alpharetta.
Okay.
We begged and pleaded for Fulton County to do the water main work on the bridge for free. They did. Okay. We begged and pleaded with adjacent we had to acquire right of way. A lot of times the most expensive part of a project is buying the land.
Sure, right.
Here in Metro Atlanta is a lot different than my hometown of South Georgia. The land is very expensive. It can be the most expensive part of the project.
Right.
So we got some right of way donations. And we eventually got to $10 million, and we built it. And
so I'll just add that those right-of-way donations, just to talk about the success of the project, when I drive up and down that road now, the folks that probably gave those right-of-ways, those are filled right now with residential townhomes and condos and houses. It's just that since that bridge has been built, it's just been people can't build it fast enough.
Right.
Put stuff there. People want to be there. So you got the money to do it. Now, do you general contract the job, or do you ask the state to do it? I mean, to build a bridge over 400, I mean, how does...
So it's different.
What happens next?
Sure, yeah. It's different in every particular case. In that case, we went through the city of Alpharetta.
Okay.
The city is a fantastic partner. They always were for North Fulton CID, and so they bid it. They bid the whole thing. They hired the contractor. We provided the project management, so we paid a big firm here in Atlanta to oversee the construction administration of it, so that everything was procured, through the way the government does it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it took we completely closed the road. We worked really closely with the mall. They asked us to please not close the bridge until after the holiday shopping season was over.
That. Yeah.
So we obliged. Yeah. We said, at the minute that holiday shopping season is over, we're going to get the bulldozers out there. So we did, and we tore it down. So that thoroughfare was completely closed, but there was not the traffic there at that time.
Right.
So people just weren't using it.
Sure.
About midway through construction, we got word that Top Golf was looking at the site, which was pretty cool. The first Top Golf in Georgia came to the site. And it, now I think sometimes the beauty of CIDs is that we can be a little bit visionary with infrastructure, which is a lot of times local governments are really just trying to keep up, and they really are providing basic services, police, fire, school systems.
Right.
We can be we have the luxury of being a little more visionary, and we can build the bridge before the development comes.
Right. Be a little cherry on top of the cake or whatever.
That's right. Yeah. So we've got a bridge in Perimeter, a bridge at Perimeter Center Parkway Bridge, a little different from Encore Parkway, but people used to call it the bridge to nowhere.
Yeah, right.
And now it's because the bridge came first, and sometimes it takes a while for the development to catch up. And now the State Farm site is there.
Right.
We've got several huge mega developments adjacent to that.
Absolutely.
So it shows you that sometimes the infrastructure can be the thing that's visionary.
Well, it's a cool project, and I was amazed at how fast it went. I've never seen a bridge get built that fast. And usually they're built by the state and everything else. I know there's a lot more things to go through and funding requirements, things that slow it up, different inspections that are required and improvements, especially when you're using different grants. I've heard people talk about. So it was very quick from the time you broke ground on it. I think it was. I don't remember, was it 6 months or something?
So in total, it was about an 18-month project. 18 Some of that was sort of behind the scenes.
I'm guessing. It just looked quick, I guess.
Yeah, but no, we did. We had a very tight contract, and we had liquidated damages that we were ready to assess the contractor. If they went a day over, we were ready to assess liquidated damages. It was a good contractor. I may have taken Chick-fil-A biscuits out to the workers more than once to make sure everybody was happy.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for that in-depth look. That's really interesting to see how that works. And so, now you've moved on to the Perimeter CID. Quite a different area. Still there are a lot of similarities too. There's a lot of business activity, a lot of Class A offices and that kind of thing, but just a huge scale down at the Perimeter CID. My office is down there as well at Assurance Financial, and we're there's cranes everywhere. I'm right near the State Farm campus, which is going up. Can you give us some idea, if you can compare the two CIDs, in mass and scale and the makeup of properties, the budget differences, for example? What's kind of the differences between those two?
Yeah, so, to give you a little bit of perspective, North Fulton CID has around 375 property owners. Okay. Of course, that can change as properties consolidate or, split up. And has a budget of around $2 million, $2.2 million annually.
Okay.
Annually. So in the neighborhood of $2 million annually with over 300-something property owners. We have about 120 property owners at Perimeter, and we generate $8 million annually.
So
smaller area, less owners, but the properties are immensely more valuable, per parcel.
Much more dense, a lot of taller buildings and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So, for those that don't know, the Perimeter area has seen a huge, massive influx of new development and relocation. It was huge already, but just recently, the State Farm campus, if you're not familiar with it, when it's completed, you're talking 4 20-plus story buildings, a massive campus. Mercedes-Benz just located, it's just outside of your district, as we were talking about before you got on the show. But they just relocated right there in the area. Their North American headquarters, and several massive developments are being proposed right now across from the State Farm campus. So I just wonder, with all this going on, what are the biggest issues that your board is concerned with in the Perimeter CID? What kind of things are y'all looking at doing? What are in the works, and what kind of issues are you concerned with down there? Yeah,
you're right. There's so much going on. There's so much growth. we really, traffic is the number one thing that we're focused on.
With all the growth,
with all the growth
coming.
Yeah. We just completed a master plan. When I got to Perimeter CID, one of the things that was the most important to me and to the board was to come up with a new project list, right? I talked about the magic of the project list to be able to really get buy-in from your constituents. So we developed a new project list. We came up with 37 projects that we want to build over the next 10 years. We bring in about $8 million a year. The trending is looking like that's probably going to go up.
Okay.
So we should have the resources to be able to accomplish some of this. Traffic is the number one thing. We broke our master plan really out into kind of 3 different areas, and the number one priority is getting people in and out of Perimeter, so access.
Right.
How do we get people in Perimeter in the morning and out in the afternoon?
Yeah, how do you? I'm there. How do you do that?
There's a secret route. No. That is a challenge. That's a challenge. The market was frankly not built. It was built as a suburban market.
Right.
It was not built for the amount of people that are there now. One of the blessings of Perimeter is that we do have MARTA.
Yes.
I spend a lot of time talking to folks in the real estate community. And I always tell them that we have the oceanfront property in Metro Atlanta.
Yes.
We've got it in Perimeter. We have 4 heavy rail MARTA stations. There's one Dunwoody MARTA station, Sandy Springs MARTA station, the Medical Center MARTA station, and then just north of our boundaries, the North Springs MARTA station.
That's right.
And as we know, this, Geoff, they're just not building those anymore.
No.
And it's so cost prohibitive. So we do have transit is a huge part of and access to transit, making sure that people can get to those stations safely. Trail project. Believe it or not, there's some parts of Perimeter that were not connected by sidewalks. So one of the first things when I got there,
sidewalks again.
I know. Yeah. When the sidewalks are the universal thing that can unite us all.
Yes.
One of the first things that I did is I got in the car and rode around, and we did an inventory of sidewalks and found places where there's no sidewalk. So how can we expect people to traverse that area to get to MARTA if there's no sidewalk? So we built about $300,000 worth of sidewalk just last year. But transit is going to play a major part in what we do.
Well, I notice, all these massive developments that I just talked about, all of them are right around a MARTA station. The State Farm Complex, there's 2, the
High Street.
High Street. Mm-hmm. That's like a mini city is what it looked like to me when I saw the renderings. That's right next to the MARTA station. And that's my line usually too. I guess I stole it from you. It's like oceanfront property when you got around the MARTA line. So that kind of, you stole my next question, was how would you plan around that? So that's it, is transit, and mostly when you're talking about getting people out of that area, what y'all are thinking is MARTA's the only way really to do it. There's no way it's not like you're widening Abernathy or Perimeter Center, right? Or building a road over top of it, or
that. Well, you know what? Believe it or not, in some places we are talking about road work. It really is a blend. I think getting people in and out by train, by bicycle, by foot, by scooter. That's something that we're talking about now.
Okay. All right.
And by car. The truth is, not everyone is going to ride MARTA. Not everyone is going to ride their bike. So we have to have a blend of options. In our master plan, trails have become in the real estate community, trails have become a very, very glamorous thing for CIDs to talk about now. Okay. We have a trail program. We're working to connect Perimeter to my colleagues down at the Buckhead CID have constructed Path 400, which is fabulous. If you drive on Georgia 400 and you wonder what that is, on the side, that's a path. On the south side, it will connect to the Beltline. On the north side, right now, it kind of goes in the buffer of Georgia 400 up to sort of where the toll booth used to be.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And we want that to continue to march north. We've actually, we are going to get it through the interchange, the 285 at Georgia 400 interchange is being constructed. Into Perimeter, right? So hopefully one day within the next 10 years, you could ride your bike from Perimeter to the Beltline safely on that trail all the way down.
Wow. I can think of a few people off the top of my head that would jump on top of that trail as the minute it was born. When I think of the Perimeter area, I don't think of it right now as a walkable, bikeable type area. It wasn't built like that in the beginning, but some of these new plans I've seen with the high street. Yeah. That looked like something that could totally change that area, the character of that area. And I think it was the economic development director for the city of Dunwoody had just said that with these new projects, they're creating a whole new gravity or something to the area. So it seems like you're in the middle of a transitional shift in terms of how people view that, as far as maybe before it was just an area with a lot of office buildings, to an area that's really where people are going to want to live, work, and play, and have a little more character, I guess, or something.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's part of the desire for me to go to the Perimeter CID was because I agree with you. I think that the Perimeter area is sort of in the middle of a renaissance right now.
Okay.
And I was personally excited to be a part of that. I mean, you've got a market. If you look at the spectrum, if you've got like downtown Atlanta, there's a CID there, the Downtown Improvement District.
Right. Okay.
Their name is Central Atlanta Progress, but it's a CID.
Okay.
Like downtown cores are built to be dense.
Yeah.
They're built to be cities.
Yeah.
Suburban, here in my experience at North Fulton CID, this was very much a suburban market.
Right.
Perimeter's somewhere in the middle. It's not downtown Atlanta, but it's also not Alpharetta.
Right.
It's becoming more urban and more dense by the day, and I was really excited to be a part of that.
Yeah.
You see it. The numbers show that. Anecdotally, though, you also see that. There's 9,000 people living in Perimeter right now.
Wow.
In apartments.
Right.
15 years ago, no one was living there. And now there are actually so many people living in the Perimeter market now that there have been conversations about building a high school in Perimeter.
No kidding.
Yeah,
okay.
because now, and that's exactly the sort of transformation that needs to happen for that the magic moment to turn.
Yeah.
For it to be exciting and have a nightlife and have energy and have people pushing baby strollers, and that's the thing that's happening now is that transition, and that's really what I think is turning from Perimeter from just a business district to actually a hip, cool, exciting place that has a special energy,
a full blown community. Yeah, because Dunwoody in the past was always the east side. There couldn't have been more different. The east side of Dunwoody, if you drive it, it's nothing but swim and tennis community after swim and tennis community, and a couple strip centers, and you got the little downtown-ish kind of area there at I guess that's Mount Vernon.
Yeah, the Village.
And then of course the Perimeter Mall area, which is just totally the two shall not mix. Well, now it's really cool to see that transaction.
I'm going to say this too, just because you're exactly right.
Okay.
And one of the very smallest project that I have worked on since I've been at Perimeter, and yet the one that I was the most excited about is a bridge. Mm-hmm. So you're right. The two parts of Dunwoody were literally disconnected.
Yeah.
And the CID worked with the city of Dunwoody to help build a bridge. It's a pedestrian bridge, not a vehicular bridge, which is what I would have wanted.
Yeah.
But it's a pedestrian bridge that connects the Georgetown community to the back of Ravinia, if you're familiar with that area.
Absolutely. That's
and so it's literally the first time that the two areas have been connected. And I talked to a gentleman who lived in one of those swim tennis communities, and he had for years, and he worked in Perimeter, and he told me that he used to, even though like as the crow flies, he was like 20 feet away from his office,
right,
he would have to go out of his neighborhood and onto 285 and weave his way over, and now he can just walk over a creek.
No, that's awesome.
So we put in about $250,000 to build a wooden bridge over a creek.
Yeah.
But it's literally the first time that the residential and the business are connected. And I think that that's philosophically a very big deal.
We're getting kind of near the end, but and I don't want to put you on the spot or nothing, but I've heard rumors of talk of an east-west kind of transit light rail thing out to the Battery, maybe, or something like that. Is that rumor? Is that hope? Is that wish? Or is there any?
I hope it's fact.
Yeah. Who wouldn't, right?
I hope it's fact. No, you're right. There's a study that's being done.
Okay.
It's very much being studied.
Okay.
This Mayor John Ernst from the city of Brookhaven, I will give him a lot of credit because he watched as the North Fulton corridor, the Georgia 400 corridor, has now gotten transit. Thanks to the CID and the chamber and the cities, they have now gotten transit that's going to be built in the managed lanes, that it will be constructed on Georgia 400.
That's right, the bus rapid transit.
The bus rapid transit lane. So the mayors south of North Fulton along the 285 corridor have watched that, and now there's a precedent precedent that's been set, right?
Okay.
That you can get transit built in your managed lanes. So Mayor John Ernst had the vision to get all the mayors together. I think there's 7. He kept saying the mayors from Tucker to Smyrna. Mm-hmm. So as you go, it's like Tucker, Chamblee, Doraville, Dunwoody, Sandy Springs. Then there's some unincorporated Cobb and Smyrna. I don't think I left anybody out. He also to study a transit line between Tucker and Smyrna.
Some sort of transit line.
Some sort of transit
light
line.
rail or bus rapid transit on some managed lane.
Some sort of transit line. Okay. He was also gracious enough to include the CIDs. So there's 2 big CIDs, the Cumberland CID, which is over in the Brave Stadium area, us at the Perimeter CID. We also brought along Tucker CID. There's a small CID in the city of Tucker.
Okay.
And so we all chipped in to a study. This Perimeter CID put in $15,000, and we studied it. We studied the corridor to determine could we do it. And we're actually now about to enter the second phase of doing a transit plan. So we will have a transit plan, and so now becomes the hard part of lobbying the Department of Transportation to get them to do on 285 what they are doing on Georgia 400. To build the bus rapid transit stations. They have determined bus rapid transit, by the way.
Right.
They, as of right now, the mayors in the group eliminated heavy rail transit as an option. It's too cost prohibitive, and when you pencil it out of how many pennies you would have to ask your constituents for in sales tax, and when you actually look at those numbers, it becomes very clear very quickly that bus rapid transit
and we talked about that last month when Senator Beach was here about 5 years ago there was a big push. We're going to increase the penny sales tax to bring the North Rail line up all the way to Windward Parkway, and the heavy rail is $300 to $500 million a mile to build. So it was a tremendous amount of money. I think it was $5 billion is what they were trying to raise. And it was just hard to get everybody, all the mayors of up in North Fulton, on board with that project, and so they've got to answer to voters who are going to have to pay for that. One thing that is fascinating, why I was so excited to have you here. First of all, I think you've done great work everywhere you've been, and you've done your footprints all over North Fulton, and so I was really excited to have you here for that and to talk about these CIDs. I mean, it's a little nerdy. It's if you're a government, someone who follows and reads the local papers, it's a little nerdy in that regard. But it is just something like this. You say, okay, you got an east-west transit line where we didn't have to get voter approval to do a study, and now we've got a study in place. And, as you've proven by talking about things like the Encore Bridge, studies and engineering and getting all that stuff in place really provides a nice launching pad to make things like that happen. So I just really enjoyed you being on the show. It was really fascinating to me to listen to all the stuff that you've done and what you've been doing. Anything else you want to talk about down there in the perimeter area, or anything I left out?
I think you covered it. I mean, CIDs are I'm the biggest fan of CIDs in Georgia.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I'm a huge, I really hope that they continue to proliferate.
Yeah.
It really, I always hear people talk about public-private partnerships. I mean, it really is it. And I was going to add one more thing about the boards of CIDs are very important. Every CID is governed by a board of directors. Mm-hmm. Half of the people that are on the board are elected from the membership of the district, and the other half of them are appointed by the local governments.
I see.
I often get asked, who's leading these things and who's in charge?
Sure.
So it is important to note that local governments in the CID, City of Alpharetta or Fulton County, like in my case, Fulton County gets to appoint 2 people to our board. DeKalb County gets to appoint 2 people, the City of Sandy Springs and Dunwoody. So it's just very important I just want everybody to understand that we are governed.
Right.
There's definitely an overlap there between the government, because you certainly couldn't have CIDs just willy-nilly building whatever they wanted.
Right.
I mean, I often tell my own board of directors, we couldn't put a crepe myrtle in the median, on the side of the road without some governmental body giving us permission to.
Sure.
So it's sort of that perfect symbiotic relationship between the public sector and the private sector that somehow magically gets things done.
Magically gets things done. If you thought things magically get done while you're driving around, now you know. Ann Hanlon is one of those behind the scenes making it happen, and her boards. So, Ann, thank you so much again for coming on the show. I can't thank you enough. As a person working down in your Perimeter CID, please keep up the good work. And we'll hope to see you on down the road.
Thank you, Geoff. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And so other than that, I'll look to my producer over there to make sure that I've covered everything. But thank you all for tuning in to this episode of ATL Developments with Geoff Smith. Have a great summer. School's about to get out. Everybody go on vacation, enjoy yourself, and get back to work. We'll talk to you soon.
You're connected more than ever. Your friends, your family, your life. And banking is what you do on your time, anywhere you like. Renaissance understands how you bank, offering mobile banking services you need. At Renaissance, we also understand that sometimes you need to speak to real people with real answers. That's why Renaissance has more than 170 convenient locations throughout the South ready to serve you. Renaissance Bank, understanding you. Member FDIC.